Oh, it looks
All
like
right, well,
more's coming right now.
yep, they'll be pouring in. So, well, welcome everybody. We're going to go ahead and start. We're recording. Welcome to tonight's Zoom at 8. My name is Julianne Peterson. I am a commercial loan officer for Old Capital Lending. And, you know, we are a premier provider of debt for multifamily, storage, mobile home park, office, retail. So if any of those are things that you're working on, I would appreciate the opportunity to provide the debt. You know, last year we closed $1 billion in loans, so we know how to execute. Anyway, I wanted to let you know I am the host today. And before we get started with our guest tonight, with Cindy Mirliss with Kaliser and Associates, I want to hear from you. What has happened in the past week? Anybody got anything working that you'd like to share? Like Tim, what's your update today? Anything changed from yesterday?
Hey guys, sorry, I'm actually shopping right now at a grocery store, and I got caught by a friend of mine I haven't seen in a long time, so otherwise I would have been sitting in my office right now. So the recent changes, we spoke about them, I believe, a couple of days ago. When we went to tour the property, we discovered that there was a murder in the vicinity, really close to the property. And we've been able to underwrite the deal, and we're looking possibly at 65 LTV in order to fund this thing. And I think we're pretty good with those numbers. We're currently working and securing our property management, and we're working on, I guess, filling out and doing the paperwork for the capital to get the lender's approval and all of that. We're also going to be talking to Neighborhood Scout, I believe, to get some ideas of how bad the crime is in that area. I mean, we've done our research. We haven't seen anything significant there. Just pretty normal, I guess, B- B kind of area. So still working. And we also submitted the LOI. We sent the LOI today, this morning. We typed up a good explanation of why our LOI is below what it typically would be. So we're hoping to get this thing on the contract.
Well, that's excellent. Did you do anything more, like calling the police at all? Getting some
yes,
information?
yes, absolutely. Yes, thank you for reminding me. Yes, my partner, he did dial the police, and we were given 2 numbers to call. One is a number for, can't remember what they called, but one number is specifically for companies that provide these kind of crime statistics on the web. And the other one was, I can't remember, but the other one was for, to get more accurate data, statistical data in that city. So we were given those numbers, and we haven't actually called them yet. We're pretty busy with the LOI and submitting the forms and everything.
Yeah.
But that's going to be the next thing, I guess, tomorrow.
Yeah. Chris, do you have any thoughts on, you know, crime? Have you looked into maybe giving him some feedback or direction on some of the things with crime in your area?
Are you asking me, Julie?
Yeah, Chris.
Yeah, actually, he and I can maybe talk a little bit offline. I'm going through that. I've done a lot of research. I got some good news actually today from the police commissioner actually in town on our property. I've done you know, the same kind of stuff, you know, the neighborhood scouts and stuff, and looked at all of the crime. But, you know, it doesn't really tell the story. You need somebody on the ground that can explain, you know, the difference between, like, you know, robbery, theft, you know, car damage or vandalism versus like actual murder, assaults and things like that. Because there are some low-income areas that have crime, but a lot of them aren't as serious as maybe it seems on a report. And so you got to kind of allow that to guide you a little bit better on your decision making versus just writing something off. You know, guys like Neil Bawa will say, "Oh, don't even go near a property under over a 500 score." which is true. You know, that's pretty bad. But again, it just depends on your taste and your comfort level, and also the price you're paying for the property. Because if you're getting a really, really good deal, it can offset that crime. Because if you're still cash flowing, everybody needs a roof over their head. You may not have the stomach for it, but if you can cash flow really nicely and get the property right, it could be good. But we should talk a little bit offline because I've just got some updates from my property.
So
Absolutely.
you guys talk amongst yourselves.
Yes, thank you. We will.
All right,
Absolutely.
Patrick, what do you got? Anything you want to share along with the deals that you're working on right now?
No, I don't have anything immediate right now. Well, maybe. My deal fell apart last weekend, so I currently don't have anything under contract.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we were hitting our platform really hard though, with that Apartment Investor Pro, and we were writing our drip campaigns and setting all that stuff up, the automation, and that was what we did all weekend mostly. We do have a partner that we engaged with last year that all of a sudden came out. He said coming awake in his email, and I put it in the Slack channel. But basically, I don't know if any of you guys have done this before, but I've known him for 2004. Wealthy individual, know, like, and trust him. Can you mute that? It's so hard to.
Hold on, I'm muting. There he goes.
Thank you.
Go ahead. Yep.
He would like to, and he wants to get in, and we've engaged him about us joint venturing with him. We've brought him a couple of deals already. What do you think? He's now saying coming awake, really want to get in. He's cash heavy right now. But he doesn't know how, and I don't know how an agreement would look where he's a hold investor. He just wants to hold. That's what he does. But we would put in only like 50 grand. He's thinking, you know, because he doesn't want us to be out a lot of money for a long period of time. But he's going to drop it's going to probably be a $10 million property. So he's probably going to end up, you know, dropping like 400. I'm sorry, like 4 million or 3 million or something total, right? So potentially, but he's saying, well, you know, I don't really work a lot. You know, I went to go visit him last time. It was at his hangar, and he's just like, I only work like 14 hours a week. So he wants us to do the sweat equity side.
Makes sense.
But I don't have any idea, and he doesn't know how to. He actually made his money in commercial buildings, but he's repositioning to a commercial office. He's repositioning to multifamily.
That's
So
a
I
good
don't really.
that.
How do you structure a deal where we're just a sliver on the equity stack going in, and then we gain percentage ownership by our success at executing the value add business plan? How do you structure that up front? How do you represent that in an SDA? What has anybody ever seen or heard of something like this?
Patrick, the sky's the limit. I mean, you can execute a deal any way you want. You can get really creative, but if you want to call me offline, we can talk about some of the options, because I've done some creative stuff in the past.
Okay.
And it may not be a cookie cutter form that you fill out, but there is a creative way to articulate or draw out the agreement the way you want. It's a simple operating agreement up front, and then the expectations have to be set and everybody has to execute their part. But if you want to call me, my cell phone's actually on the Slack channel. You can call me when we get out of here.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Is there anything you want to put on top of that before we get going to kind of address that?
Yeah, and I think what Chris is saying is correct. You can carve out and structure the company, you know, as you need to. Most probably where you're putting in, it sounds like the sweat equity, and perhaps this individual is going to put in more of the actual cash equity. I would say if you're doing a syndication with a Class A, Class B structure, the way you divide your Class B could be pivotal, so that depending on what his expectations are and what you're actually putting into the deal, that could be where you reap the value down the road. Once the asset is performing, you'll get a larger chunk of the distributions through the Class B shares.
So did you class A or class? Oh, class A or class B shares, because it would be a joint
Yes.
venture in this case, because I would be unable, I believe, to syndicate to him. So he's a majority owner. The lender would require him be a part of the GP. It's Julie's fault. So
Yeah.
I think it would have to be a JV or a tenants in common or somewhere, one of those, right?
Yeah, it's fine. It still doesn't really have much to do with the actual distributions and returns. You guys just have to structure it up front the way you all feel comfortable. So again, we chat about it offline. No big deal.
Okay.
We
Cool.
get it figured out.
Appreciate
Hey,
it.
the hard part's done, dude. You got a guy with money. That's awesome.
Yeah. Well, we still got to find a property.
Yeah, you'll find one.
Find the one that'll finally say yes to.
Hey, there's bigger problems out there. I think you can manage that.
Yeah,
I'm sure
right.
of it. Well, you guys, I think this is a great transition. I'd like to introduce my friend and gal that if you've never worked with Cindy, she is outstanding. In 2015, she joined Kaliser and Associates as a lead counsel and then became a partner in 2019. She was born and raised in Boston, and she moved to Dallas with her husband. She attended Boston University for her undergraduate and then received her Juris Doctorate from Texas A&M University School of Law in 1995, just right around the time that I was born. She has worked at several of the larger firms in Dallas, including Barron and Budd, Jones Day, and McCool Smith, as well as in-house counsel for Stream Energy. If you have never worked with Cindy, you will know these are the things that she just does so great, is that she really partners. She assists her clients with commercial real estate transactions. She does private security fundraising, SEC syndications for multifamily projects, as well as other commercial and real estate related projects. She also does wills and estate planning. So at this time, you guys, I want to welcome to all of you, Cindy Mirliss. Thank you so much for joining us. Cindy,
Julie.
take it away.
Yes, thank you for the very kind words. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Like Julie said, we work with many of you and many of the multifamily investors out there. We're a full service law firm, which means not only can we handle your contract to closing, we also do all the SEC syndication work. And I have a PowerPoint slideshow to share. Let's see how I do this. Well, share that.
Do you want me to work on sharing mine? Oh, no, there you go.
Done it.
Good, perfect.
Good, okay. Let's see, okay, so there I am. And
then go down to the bottom.
How you can reach, I also have my own email, but team@kaliserlaw.com. Anything that I present tonight, anything that you need, you can reach out to us at that email. So I think what I really want to share, I think this is one of the most important slides on this PowerPoint, is the timeline. I know some of you are active in deals. I think some of you may be new to syndication, and just kind of give you an overview of what a deal looks like from start to finish.
Can I interrupt you for just a second?
Yes.
Can you hit that little icon at the bottom? It looks like a little screen. Go over all to the right, move over to the left a little bit. Right there.
Right there.
Yep.
Yep. Ah, perfect. Okay. I wondered how to do that.
There you go. Now you're professional.
All right. So the timeline begins with, well, typically it begins with your letter of intent, the LOI. What we're seeing a lot now is buyers able to negotiate an early access agreement kind of in conjunction with the LOI. And if you aren't familiar with those or haven't utilized that at all, it gives you an opportunity to do kind of a pre-due diligence on the property prior to going under contract and having any earnest money in play. So we are seeing a lot of early access agreements during this time. The LOI, I plan to kind of go into that in more detail if we have time here, because right now everything with COVID-19, obviously things are different than they were before, and we're having in the LOI and in our PSAs a lot of COVID-19 provisions and stipulations to protect you, basically with the unknown of if you're going to be able to do due diligence, if you're going to be able to get your financing timely. So we have a lot of language that we're putting into both the LOI and the PSA to help protect you there. Next, once you have an agreed upon LOI, we go into PSA negotiations. You know, we help you with that, depending on, you know, the agreeability of the seller, how much we have to go back and forth. You know, we do all that. Once you get under contract, you're in due diligence at that point, and we are reviewing your title for you and looking at any, objecting to any liens or encumbrances or easements on the property, bringing anything to your attention that's pivotal on title. During due diligence, we're assisting you with forming your LOI, LLCs rather, creating your entities, and then getting into all the syndication documents. And this is where you start raising money. Next step, once you start accepting investor funds, is doing your SEC and Blue Sky filing, based on where your investors are located. You must put the state on notice that you're raising money from an individual in that state. And then it's working with Julie and your lender and your lender's attorney, and providing all the information that your lender needs, all the lender due diligence, background checks, UCC searches, reviewing your loan documents. If you are purchasing a property with a loan typically above 1 million or 1.5 million, a legal opinion from your attorney is required, basically stating that we vetted you as a borrower and you are good, and then bringing you all the way to closing. So typically start to finish, used to be between 45 and 60 days. Now things are taking a little bit longer because of COVID-19 and the uncertainty of actually being able to begin due diligence. But that kind of gives you an idea of the timeline. I can stop now for any questions on this, if anyone has any questions on the timeline.
What is sorry, go back to the very beginning, an
Sure.
early access agreement? I never heard of that before.
Have you not? Yes. So it's not uncommon and becoming more increasingly common. So basically, it's a early look at the property prior to actually having an executed contract, an executed PSA. It can be, I guess, typically about a 3 to 5 day look. Not so much as an in-depth due diligence, but kind of cursory look at some of the more important aspects. Roofs, usually you can get into a couple of units, you know, having your property management company come out with you to kind of assess the property. So basically it's a mini due diligence, I would say.
It's kind of like right now I'm just secret shopping the places, just walking up pretending like I'm a potential resident. I guess that's like the official way to do it.
Yeah, and typically an actual agreement is signed between you, potential buyer, and the seller to cover liability because you're going on the property, to spell out what you can and can't have access to. And we draw those up, and it gives, obviously, the buyer confidence in the asset, and also the seller that you're serious about moving forward. And also draws any red flags if there's anything on the property that you might not have known about. It's either an opportunity for you to walk away before having any earnest money at play, or feel confident if the seller, which is becoming increasingly less at this point as far as having hard money upon signing the PSA. But if hard money is the only way to get the deal under contract, if you've had that early access, you have a little more confidence in what the asset is, how the asset's performing.
Julie, can I ask one question?
Oh, yeah. Go ahead, Daryl.
I just want to make sure I'm not interpreting this the wrong way.
Sure.
Are you, from my understanding, are you, or not you, but your company helping or walking, like holding the hand of the potential buyer through these steps? Am I misinterpreting?
Absolutely. Now, we don't actually, no, you're not misinterpreting at all. We hold your hand through the entire process. We don't actually go out and do the due diligence with you. That's more of a property manager function, but we walk you through the entire process here. And I think you brought up a good point. The way we structure things is we do everything on a flat rate legal basis. So meaning you're not billed hourly for questions, for, you know, any concerns you have, any times you have to end the whole process.
Okay, so I find the deal, but I don't submit the LOI. I will come to you and you will submit, you will type up the LOI and everything.
Absolutely. So we actually like when clients come to us at that LOI stage, and we do that no charge at that point. We either can draft the LOI for you, or if, you know, it's one that you're using, we will review it free of charge and make sure that all the key points are in there. So that eventually, I'm sorry
to interrupt. I just have a question on that to follow up to what Daryl was saying. So LOI, you know, I have my own LOI template and I'm fairly confident with it. It has like a 30 point list of documents for deliverables.
Great.
But my question is, like with the current deal I'm on, and I'm a friend of the seller, so he had already sent me everything, have all the BD. But when I sent him the LOI, he said, well, I don't have some of these things, like geological survey. And so how do you treat, and I told him, well, you can always provide me with a statement that states in writing with your signature on it that I can sign an agreement to, that you've submitted these items as on Exhibit A, or as referenced in the LOI, and that these items you did not have or were not completed. So how do you treat the LOI when you have that laundry list and the seller says, oh, I can't deliver that, it doesn't exist, or
and that's not uncommon at all. And I think what you're saying is, so interestingly, not all LOIs spell out all the due diligence materials that will be included in the PSA. Good that yours has that. Typically, you would sign off on what, now if it's something that's going to be necessary for you to analyze the property properly, I think you'd have to make a business decision whether you can move forward without that information. I mean, if the seller doesn't have it, obviously it's going to be impossible to get. The other thing we stress to put in the LOI regarding due diligence materials is your timeline for due diligence will not start until all materials have been received by you. So again, you'd have to have the seller sign off, and you'd have to be in agreement that the materials that they don't have, you're okay with them not providing.
Yeah, because like, for example, a geological survey, well, that could be in a phase 1. And if that's the case, and the seller is going to be responsible for paying for the phase 1, then it would have to be agreed that, okay, we have everything except we're moving this to the phase 1 portion of, you know, due diligence for, you know,
right,
inspection.
And you want to specify that that would be a seller expense.
Yeah, okay.
Yep.
All right, let's keep going because we can probably ask some of these questions as we go along, maybe at the end. Yeah. I just don't want to run out of time.
No, for sure. So I want to know how to advance my screen. Okay, here we go. Figured it out. Okay, so the next several slides, and they're pretty detailed, and just as a follow-up, anyone who wants a copy of this presentation or a copy of our LOI that we've put together that you're welcome to use, please email me at team@kaliserlaw.com, and we'll provide all of that in case we don't touch on everything here. But basically, with the new world we're in, we've added, like I said, a lot of terms into our LOI that didn't used to be there. And although the LOI is non-binding, it is the agreement that you're reaching with the seller. So I've seen deals fall apart because the terms in the LOI weren't explicitly agreed upon. And then when we get to PSA phase, buyers want one thing, sellers want another thing, back to the LOI, even though it's non-binding, and asserting that, well, it wasn't in here, so we're not agreeing to that. So moral of that story is, as much as you can get in your LOI, the major terms agreed to, I would advise doing so. So for something simple, under when you're stating you as the purchaser, we always advise putting in and/or signs, because ultimately, you will take your LOI and your PSA and assign it to an entity that you will create once you know you're going forward with the deal. There's no sense in spending the money or creating the LLC prior to your either completing due diligence or being quite confident that you're going forward. You don't want to incur that expense. So you want your seller to understand that you're going to be assigning the PSA ultimately to an entity that you're going to create to take title to the property. Earnest money, you always want to spell out the complete, let's say you're putting $100,000 in earnest money down. You want to write out, I know this sounds picky, but 1,000, because hard versus soft earnest money, again, up until recently, there was always some money going hard at the beginning. And now we're seeing with the COVID-19 situation that you're able to get under contract. We have several clients now, they're under contract without any money hard up front. I think because of the situation and the uncertainty going forward, whether you're going to be able to begin due diligence timely, whether you're going to be able to get your loan timely. So that's kind of a turn of events now. So this is the big thing we've added to our LOIs now and our PSAs, is a COVID-19 provision. So force majeure, for those not familiar, that is often in a contract, and that's kind of an act of God. But the COVID-19 provisions that we're putting in are much more specific, basically saying that if, based on protocols, you cannot begin due diligence when you've scheduled to do it because you're not allowed onto the property. All your timelines and due diligence will be so a better timeline and dates for you as far as pushing out due diligence, which should also push out your closing date and so forth. And again, on due diligence, you always want to spell out the number of days. And like I said, you don't want your due diligence to commence until you've received all the due diligence items. So financing contingency, that's something that we have not been seeing prior to COVID-19 necessarily. And now we are seeing quite a bit, and suggesting that you go ahead and put a financing contingency in your LOI, make it broad. If seller won't accept it, so be it. But what it's going to do is give you another out on your earnest money if in fact you get down the road and you cannot obtain your financing. Are you seeing that, Julie, on deals now?
Yes, absolutely. And we have one person that usually joins us, and that held up his whole deal. They were okay with the due diligence, but when it came to the finance contingency, the seller said, absolutely not, I am not extending this. And they said, well, we cannot agree then. We're not moving forward, which is really a bummer because they've been working on it, going back and forth, and a little bit frustrating. The last we heard from him, I think was last week, is that they still hadn't come to an agreement on the finance that was just on that piece.
So they weren't under contract yet. They were just trying to negotiate the big.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, it's certainly advantageous for the buyer to get that contingency in there because, like I said, it's another out down the road. They can't get financing, an ability to get there. They usually would run longer than the due diligence period. And then the last couple of years, you know, just the market hasn't required it. But it seems that it's trending back to trying to get those financing contingencies in there.
Well, it's another way to delay it as well, right? I mean, if because of the, you know, T3s, if we see declining income, that's just another way to say, well, maybe it's the T4 may, you know, just extending it out and giving them more opportunity to really vet that property, that opportunity.
Yeah, and you know, and the lenders want that as well. I mean,
true.
Yeah.
Yep.
In order to get approved for financing, they need to see income there. So this is an interesting contingency, an equity contingency to put in there. We have only seen it accepted once. I don't know if it's going to become more prevalent, but it's basically a contingency saying that if I cannot raise my money, I am able to get my earnest money back. So it's something that kind of wishful thinking at this point that we can get in there. Like I said, we've only seen it once being accepted, but it could be important because if you, in this climate, can't raise money for investors, you're not going to be able to close. So it's just another little creative way to preserve your earnest money, especially if anything has gone hard.
That's a new one. I've never heard that one so far.
I'm sorry?
That's a new one.
It is a new one. So
do you have to disclose then that this is specifically for syndication? Because that's what that's saying. It's saying, look, I'm raising the money. I mean, either JV or syndication, but it's essentially not saying, if you don't sit in there saying, I'm buying this myself, or my company myself is buying it, if you're making that statement on equity contingency, because it's assuming that
you would be. Yeah, I mean, you would be playing your hand there that you are syndicating or raising money, or like you said, JVing the project. But again, in the climate we're in, it could be important to have that out there if, in fact, it can get accepted so that you have that ability to have an out if you can't get your equity. So this is another kind of new development that we've seen quite a bit lately is an escrow for rents at closing. So basically what this is protection for the buyer, an amount of money agreed upon by buyer and seller, typically based on, you know, most recent rent roll, is that occupancy, let's say, needs to say 80% or higher post-closing, from anywhere from 3 to 6 months. And buyer and sellers are agreeing to escrow whatever that dollar amount would be if it falls below what current rent roll shows, so that it's a protection for the buyer for financials going forward for the 3 to 6 months post-closing. Some lenders are wanting to see this. And so we've seen this in quite a few deals recently where they actually escrow an amount to make up any shortfall in rent because of the situation we're in. Have you been seeing that at all, Julie?
Absolutely. Yeah. And we're also seeing making up the rents on the seller side, you know, holding back. We don't see, you're telling us that you've been operating this for this long. If you can't, then you're going to pay us for the next 6 months.
Yeah.
We'll collect that. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know, we always have provisions in the PSA that from effective date to closing, that seller will operate the property as it's been operated historically. But this is kind of a new future assurance that things will proceed as they've been presented.
Yes.
Quick question there. When in that clause you just talked about, that they operate it in the way that they would historically, does that refer to physical vacancy or economic vacancy, or
so that's
more of a net operating income?
Yeah, so we always try and get them to agree on economic occupancy because that's, you know, better for you. Sellers won't always agree on that. That may be something that we see more so now, but at the very least, a physical occupancy of a certain amount. And that's very important to get loan proceeds often to assure that from the effective date to closing, the seller doesn't drop occupancy. Okay, sure. And then the closing date, again, we're real sticklers about spelling out in the LOI and then into the PSA, all the dates. So because if there's a conflict, let's say for due diligence, you have 15 days as the number, but 30 days printed, whoever has drafted that LOI, it's going to be interpreted. So we just make sure that all dates are spelled out. The closing date is going to be typically a number of days from the end of due diligence. And if the COVID-19 provision is in there and due diligence has to be extended, the closing date will be extended also. Most important on this slide is to try and negotiate upfront in the LOI and into the PSA at least 2 extensions. Especially now, have 2 built-in extensions, spell out the number of days and the dollar amounts if any additional earnest money needs to be deposited with titles. So you now have that flexibility since we're in this time of unknown to have built-in extensions at the outset versus trying to negotiate extensions at the end when you're coming close to closing. That's always more expensive for you. Mm-hmm. And then obviously any additional deposits you'd have to make would apply to the purchase price.
I have a question from somebody. The question was, if there was something that they had in their LOI that was not in your LOI, could they add the things that were on your LOI to their LOI so it would be a combination?
Sure.
I mean,
sure. Yeah, absolutely.
I would think so. Okay, thank you.
And yeah, like I said, we're happy. I'm happy to provide that. You know, to anyone who wants a copy of LOI, happy to send it over.
I had a question on the rents piece and occupancy, yes. Which I do include that in mine.
Okay.
But it's more so around if the lender's requiring a minimum occupancy to fund the loan, and the seller. Yes. And let's say we want the seller to certify theirs, but let's say the occupancy is only at 87.5 and the lender's saying they need 90. Of course, that's an opportunity to retrade, but that's right. Also probably a huge cost to the buyer because the lender's going to increase the rates pretty, I would say substantially to affect the returns on this deal. So how can that be written into that portion of the LOI? In order to address that, if you're requiring a certain occupancy, if you're requiring it meet lender requirements, that the buyer would have the option to address that in terms of their offer price.
I think I would tend to put that as part of your financing contingency because it sounds like what you're saying is lender's not going to lend in the favorable terms that you're trying to get if occupancy drops below a certain amount.
Yeah.
So I would try and make sure that earnest money you have if you can't get the loan that you need. Because if the numbers aren't going to work, it's not going to allow you to get the loan.
Yeah, it's more of letting the seller know, here's a situation, if you want to sell this asset and I've got a funder, if it's not positioned as you're stating, then we can still make it happen, but you're not going to sell it for the price you want to make it happen. Yeah.
Right. Where you're going to have to do a retrade at that point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think in this market that we're getting into, it's going to be a lot more favorable for buyers to be able to negotiate that.
Yeah.
All right. If we could ask to keep going so we don't run out of time. Oh, I think we've run out of time.
Here's our, what time is it? Okay, we did good.
No,
so
here's you're good. I thought you had more. Sorry.
No, that's okay. So yeah, here's how to get in touch with us. And I don't see the team email, but it's team, TEAM @kaliserlaw.com.
I will
So
put
if
that
any
in the Slack.
copy of any of this or copy of that LOI, I'm happy to send it.
team@kaliserlaw.com.
Yes.
So I will post that in our Slack so everybody has it so they can reach out to you.
Excellent.
What other things can you see? Can you talk to us about business with COVID? What have you seen? Have you seen it slow down, 20%? Are you at 50%? What can you tell us in terms of business moving forward?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So hugely affected we were, I think, as everyone was, beginning of or mid-March to beginning of April. Many of the deals that were underwritten and under contract prior to this happening weren't working anymore. So a lot of those terminated. Interestingly, some of those are now coming back at more favorable prices. So right now, especially I would say last week and this week, we're seeing a big uptick in opportunities out there. So we're seeing a lot more activity than we were in the last 60 days. So I think people are feeling pretty optimistic about deals going forward. I think rents, interesting because we were just on our law firm kind of happy hour and people were talking about how their rents were for May so far. And interestingly, a lot of people were not seeing a decrease from April. So that's very encouraging. I think it's very market dependent, depending on where their properties are.
And that's interesting because I would say that April took a long time to collect. I mean, it was over a good portion of the month that we saw collections. To say really that, on day 4, which we're on day 5 now, we wouldn't be able to say, hey, we're at 2%, 2.9% off. But it's interesting that that's what you guys are finding, that the collections are coming in quicker to be able to state that they're not off as much. So I'll be interested to see that. Because a lot
it's surprising to me that a lot of people were just kind of putting out that feedback that their collections were pretty good.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
So can you share with us what kind of, well, there's 2 things. One, can you take care of from start to finish for the PPM, the SEC? So you are full service, correct?
Correct.
So what would the cost be? What would they need to be bringing at the front end? Like how would we start working with Cindy Mirliss?
Yeah. And so we do like we said, contract to closing, including the PPM documents. And with a little caveat, we can do that in almost every state where we can go into. We're licensed in Texas. The PPM syndication portion is all federal law, so we do that across the country. And I would say most states and most that we work with together are in states that we can also go in and do the entire transaction. So we'd love to get started when you're at the LOI phase, whether you've already had the LOI signed or want us to look at it and just make sure all the parameters are there that you need to go forward into the PSA. But certainly once you have a signed LOI, that's when you want to engage a law firm, whether it's us or somebody else, because that's when either the seller's going to provide the first draft of the PSA, or if the seller doesn't want to, we draft the PSA, again, mirroring the terms in the LOI, and that's when things get started. So that's when you would engage us, is at that signed LOI phase. And really, aside from client information and the LOI, our big thing is that we're extremely responsive, and we like to have a lot of communication with our clients so that everyone stays on track. There's a lot of things that are quite timely and necessary to be done on a timely basis, and we make sure that we don't lose track of any of that for you.
So can you share with us what that would cost?
Yeah, and it's kind of a broad range, and it's going to be more specific once you actually have your deal, because it's really dependent on where your property is located, your purchase price and number of units, capital raise. But to give an idea, let's say a small property, 1 to 2 million, all the way up to, you know, much larger, let's say a 20 million property, you're looking at a flat rate, if we're doing the entire transaction, anywhere from 10,000 to 20,000, I would say. Again, it's very broad, and you know, I'm sorry I can't get more specific, but once we know the deal that the client is bringing, you know, obviously we can talk more specifically.
And that would be paid in escrow at time of closing.
Right. So we take a retainer up front, 2,500 or so, 33, and then the balance is paid at closing through the title company. So your only out of pocket is the retainer, and then all your expenses during acquisition phase can be reimbursed from the company once you close. Okay.
Now, I know that in previous months, there were lots of LOIs going out, a lot of, you know, into best and final, and then into another best and final, and another best and final, and those clients, you know, are done and out of the game. Do you guys, I mean, it's like time after time after time. How do you get paid for when these things are you're putting time in, but they're falling out? How does that work for you?
Well, you know, it's I guess cost of doing business. So, but kind of along those lines. So it's not uncommon. Now, deals, like you said, don't come to fruition. The LOIs aren't accepted. But even when someone gets under contract and we're going through the process, and then they get into due diligence and they discover something on the property and they can't make it work and they have to terminate, never are they responsible for our entire legal fee that we've contracted for. We only charge people for the work we've done to date. You know, we're looking at making long-term relationships. Previous clients can attest to this. We're very fair as far as, you know, okay, this is all we've done. Unfortunately, the deal terminated, and let's move on to the next one.
Do you also have, you have different divisions in your company.
Mm-hmm.
Do you also help raise capital?
So we don't help raise capital because that would be a SEC violation to have us on hand to do that unless we were actually a manager and part of the sponsorship team. So we can't do that, but we do have many divisions in our company. So we have our law firm. Kaliser is our shareholder. Some of you may or may not know. He, in addition to the law firm, has his own active real estate business. He has several companies. He's also a syndicator. He has his own fund. He purchases multifamily. So I think that brings a unique aspect to us as a law firm because we understand the business side of what our clients are trying to achieve, not just the legal, you know, legal part of it. So we certainly can give, I think, advice that maybe others can't because we have that business background as well.
Makes sense, makes sense. Can we open it up, you guys? Are there any questions that you have for Cindy? She's been extremely helpful in answering a lot of the questions.
Yes, I have a question. Cindy, thank
Yes.
you for this presentation. It's great.
You're welcome.
I love it. I'm definitely going to be in touch with you, but I wanted to ask you a question. I think you already covered it, but I just want to make sure I understand correctly. You mentioned that you guys take a retainer, and my question was in the part where we make an offer, the PSA gets signed, we go through due diligence, and something doesn't work out. Whatever it is, we don't want to proceed, or the seller doesn't want to sell, we have to fall out of the contract. Is it just the retainers or the trainer cost, which is a few $1,000s you guys keep, or it's a full, or there's another charge? How do you guys deal?
Yeah, so it really would depend at what point things terminated. You know, if we'd already done your syndication documents, done your SEC filings, started working with your lender, that's obviously where more legal fees would get incurred. But if it's prior to that and it's just, you know, the work we've done and it's the retainer amount, that's all you'd be responsible for. So basically you're only billed for the work we've done to date. So you would, unless we came all the way to closing and day of closing fell apart, which unfortunately that's happened sometimes, that would be the only time that our full legal fees would be incurred.
Cindy, if we get the LOI, if I submit an LOI
Yes.
that I typed up, okay, and it was agreed upon, could I then come to you and have the rest, have the legal document, the contract, and everything else done?
Yes, that's exactly what we do. And that's when you would want to come to us and, you know, because the LOI is not binding. So that's when you need to get your PSA drafted, negotiated, and that's what we are here to help you with.
Thank you.
And obviously not everything can be covered in that LOI. It's just the major points. So the PSA is really when we get into all the protections that you need as a buyer to make sure that you're protected.
Sounds good. Thank you.
I had a question for you.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you do funds. Is that a primary focus, or is that just a side?
So not for the law firm, but for Merrill Kaliser, our shareholder, he has a fund. So he's, you know, active.
I've been investigating what it would take to create a fund. I know the SEC is cracking down currently hard on people that are raising capital for syndications.
Yes, they are. Mm-hmm.
Like just subpoenas like in the last couple months I've heard. So what would you're not the law firm to go to that focuses primarily like this is we create funds for multifamily syndications as a special focus? That's not you?
No, and I think I may have misunderstood your question. So we as a law firm, you know, many times create, they're called blind funds or open funds for our clients. So that's typically it's when you don't have a property identified. You have enough level of trust with your investors that they are relying upon your expertise and proven track record to raise capital kind of in a blind pool, to take that capital and go purchase either multifamily or storage or commercial properties or whatever your focus might be. But yes, we do that all the time.
Okay, it might be something I'd like to chat with you about. I'll shoot you an email.
Sure. And Julie, maybe you could also put up my direct contact information, which is cmirliss@kaliserlaw.com. And that'll get right.
Where physically are you located?
We're in Dallas, Texas.
But that doesn't mean that she can't do things in other states, Patrick.
Well, very few people are in California like Julie and I, so I thought since you brought it, maybe you might be.
No, but yeah, we work with clients all over the country.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I'll tell you, this is Chris Roberts. I work with Cindy on a project now currently, and just wanted to give her a plug because I personally had reached out to, I don't know, there was one well-known person within our group, and then also a couple other people that were referred to me, and couldn't get anybody consistently to return calls or follow up, or it was just really lackluster. And for an attorney, it was just a little disappointing because I have several attorneys in my life and none of them are that way. And when I was referred to Cindy by Julie, she got right back to me. We got on a call. We immediately set up a call with her partner. It was a conference call, executed everything quickly, answered all my phone calls and emails immediately. And then we've had several revisions. We're still working on it. But I just, you know, quite honestly, it was really impressive considering what I had experienced. And I'll obviously be using her going forward. But I encourage you guys, if you want someone to respond to you and follow through, she's not going to be the least expensive, but that's a good thing sometimes. And for me to spend a couple extra $1,000 for someone who's actually going to answer my calls and work with me through all my questions patiently, it's worth its weight in gold. So again, just food for thought. I'm not being paid for this plug. She just does a fabulous job, and her team is second to none. So I just want to make sure you guys know that and share that with others, because it's really hard to find good attorneys, believe me.
Yeah.
Wow. Chris, really appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, you've earned it.
Thank you.
Yeah, I you know, she's like peanut butter. I like to spread the people around that are, you know, that are like peanut butter. So.
Oh, my head is swelling.
Well, we really appreciate all that you've done for my clients, and want to make sure that everybody knows who I work with, who I push over. Nate's on the line. I think, Nate, you might have also reached out to Cindy, maybe? Nate?
No, I didn't.
Oh, okay. Well,
Unfortunately. But I will be though.
there you go. All right. Well,
Yeah.
we're happy you're here, man. We're happy you're here.
Yeah, Cindy, I'll be reaching out to you. All right.
Appreciate you, Carol. Thank
Okay.
you.
I will too.
All right. Thank you.
And so will I. So we'll all have a party with you.
I love it.
Yeah, and don't be worried about
Thank you.
don't be worried about doing business with someone across the country, because I'm in Seattle, they're in Texas, and my properties are on the East Coast. So don't sweat it.
Well, I assume the attorney in Texas would actually be less expensive than one here in Hollywood. So,
Yeah.
well,
You know what I love is that you know, the people I bring on, they make me look good too. We make them look good. They make us look good. So always a pleasure, Cindy, to have you. And unless there's any other questions for Cindy or anything that you guys want to speak of right now, as my mom used to say, forever hold your peace. Anybody? No?
No.
All right.
You're gonna put her contact information
Yes,
on Slack, right?
I will.
Okay.
Yes, and she will provide the information that she shared. So I will give you that information. So real quickly, Mauricio, we were talking about you, even though you weren't here. What's
Sorry,
the
I'm working.
okay, well, so are we. So we're all doing this together. Now, Mauricio, what is the update this week? Did we make any change on the finance contingency?
No changes have been made. As of now, it's pretty much a dead deal.
Okay.
I do have a feeling the seller might come back to us in a month or two, but at this point, we're not able to move forward.
Okay. Well, you know, there's a lot of sellers out there that are looking to be the first one out on the helicopter before this thing goes sour. So the deals, the people that want to get out now, they're going to be willing to do these contingencies to wrap this up. Because who knows what's going to happen 3 to 6 months down the road, guys. So that guy is too bad. He's going to come, you know, on his knees, can you please help me, help me? And you're going to be like, well, yeah, but now I got to, you know, drop my drawers, drop my price. So,
Yeah, I believe so.
We
Yeah,
don't want to
just-
know
just
your
from
closing
listening to
techniques.
wow. Really, really hard negotiator.
you know, guys, it's always a pleasure. Again, I always like to provide value so that, you know, your life is much easier as a syndicator, as a JV deal. So if I can help, let me know. Always be on the lookout for things that we share. And thank you, Cindy. You're awesome. We look forward to doing business with you.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having me. Nice meeting and talking with all of you. And let's look forward to good times ahead.
Yeah, there you go.
Thank you very
Exactly.
much.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you,
Have a great
Julie.
night. We'll see you next week.
Thanks.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.